I apologize. I will pause until the recording starts. All right. So thank you. We are recording, everyone. So now if you say something, it's going to be recorded for forever, and we're going to post it on the website. So just be very careful, right? So this is the travel and expense process in Concur, and I want to thank our training team for putting together this graphic. It's very cool, and as you can see, it's largely the same as our existing process. It's just easier to do this all inside of one application and inside of Concur. I want to talk specifically about booking airfare through Concur. So that is going to be a UMB policy that we book our airfare in Concur through the Concur application. And we've done this for a couple of reasons, right? Concur is a booking tool. It works the same way Travelocity or Expedia does. When you go in, and I'll show you the booking tool later in the demo, or later in the presentation during the demo. But it's, the flights that are in there are the same flights that you get, right? We've been working with our travel management company to make sure that we understand this, and it's the same global distribution network of flights that are put out. The same flight hits Travelocity that you'll see in Concur, and the prices are the same. There's no fee for booking through Concur. There's no additional expense there. We've done some price checking here and there against other sites, and largely it's been the same. The one thing that we did notice, and we confirmed this with our travel management company, is that occasionally a Google Flights price will be lower than the Concur price. But what we found is that when you click in to buy that seat, it's not available anymore. It's like a teaser rate that Google shows, and I think that's a Google Flights thing, not a Concur thing. But I want to stress that there's no additional cost to book through Concur. It's a very intuitive. You can pay with your own credit card. You can use your own rewards programs. Right? We're not limiting any of that. It's just booking through Concur makes the whole process seamless, right? When you book through Concur, especially if you're going on if you have a complex itinerary, on multiple different airlines, if something happens, especially with, stage 1, you can call the travel management company and they can fix everything for you. You don't have to call multiple different airlines and hope that you're going to get someone and hope that you don't have to wait on hold. You can call the travel management company. They're 24/7. You'll get someone right there. They can see your itinerary. They can see not just the flight that you're having a problem with, but connecting flights or any downstream impacts in your travels, and they can fix it all in one fell swoop. When you don't book through Concur, and there is an exception booking that we've added, to book outside of the system. There's a specific use case for that, but it can be used. It does add a step in your workflow process. So you do have to get Dean or VP approval when you do that because it's outside of policy. But larger, it breaks the integration, right? You put your request in, it's an exception booking, you book however you want to book, right? Excuse me. You go to Southwest, you book through Southwest or whatever airline you're going to use. Concur doesn't see that, right? So it doesn't get loaded into your TripIt mobile application. You can do that manually, but it's a manual step. That cost doesn't get loaded to your expense report. So again, that's another manual step. You have to add that. Our travel management company doesn't see that flight. So if something does go wrong, you have to work directly with those airlines to troubleshoot everything. If it's an international trip, our duty of care provider is not notified. If you book through Concur, they are. But if you don't book through Concur, you have to manually reach out to them and tell them. So booking Concur is just easier, right? Everything's connected, and then everything flows through more seamlessly. So one other note here, or two other notes, excuse me, on the request. When you put it in, please make sure that you leave time for everything to be approved before you book. You can't book through Concur unless you have an approved request. So it has to go through the full workflow. And you can see every step of that. You can see who it's with. So if it is like 2 days before, you can put it in and then just follow up with those folks because you can see it as a user. And then I wanted to talk about encumbrances. We will be able to put travel encumbrances out there using Concur. So you don't You won't have to, manually encumber these things in your shadow systems or use a temporary rec to put those costs out there. Unfortunately, we can't do that right away because we're holding up e-travel, and I don't really get into the technical anything on it, but until we shut down e-travel and we're only live with Concur, we won't be able to use the encumbrance integrations. So after that, we will be able to, but look for it next year. We're very excited to roll it out. We've done a lot of groundwork for it, but we just can't do it yet. But I'm excited that we can do it. I know that was one of the things that folks were looking for previously. I'm going to jump to the next slide, which is the changes slide. A lot of these we talked about in the August town hall, but the top two are new. So we are moving forward with just using GSA rates, and these includes including all the incidentals. So you don't have to subtract that out of your expense reports anymore. The per diems, these rates are automatically calculated on your trip. So when you put your request in, you put your dates in, where you're going, and then you just drop in your per diem and everything calculates. You don't have to do that manually. It does it all itself. It's pretty nice. It's pretty nifty. But it is a change, so I wanted to call it out. The other thing that we've changed is mileage will be automatically calculated. You have to obviously put in where you're coming from and where you're going and all of those things, but it does calculate automatically inside of the application. So you don't have to print out a map and attach it and do all that. It's all right there. And then we update those mileage rates as USM updates their mileage rates, because we follow USM. So these other changes are the same ones we talked about in August, but you can create your request form for your business expenses inside of Concur. You can we're pulling central office out of some of these expense reimbursements to move them through faster, to pull central office out to get everything's flowing quicker. As we just discussed, airfare will be booked through Concur, and then airfare paid by a personal credit card won't be reimbursed until after the trip. So, if you want to book through Concur, you can pay on your personal card, but we won't be able to reimburse those charges until after the trip. So depending on how far out your trip is, you'll have to float that cost. You're of course welcome to book on the UMB card, which is available in Concur. You can select it and pass it right through. There's no money out of pocket for you, and then it's that'll get posted when it comes in. So those are the changes, right, that we've identified moving through Concur. And I will go. I'm surprised there's no questions. I'm pleased, but maybe everyone should.
Well, actually, Luke, I was waiting for you to finish this slide and let you know that there are a couple questions in the chat, and I know Susan is answering some of them. Are there any, Susan, that you think Luke should cover?
Oh, thank you, Susan. Oh, my chat's not giving me notifications because I'm presenting. That's nifty. Let me read through them. Yes, Julie, you can book international flights through Concur.
Trying to get off my mute here. It's covered up there. Yeah, I'm just typing as fast as I can. I mean, if some of these are, everyone should be able to read the chat question and answer. And I just realized I should be, making sure I'm identifying whose question I'm answering, since they're coming in fast and furious. So I don't know if you.
Sorry, yes, they are. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate this. Yes, you can use a preferred airline. How does it work if I have UMB paying for? Yes, you have to pay for your spouse's ticket yourself. UMB can't pay for that.
I mean, to that extent, I was starting to answer that one. That is where, yes, the employee would be going through the normal request process and, has a choice to pay for it themselves or charge it directly to UMB via Concur. And then for the spousal or family travel, then you should be contacting the TLC, Travel Leaders Corporation, is going to be our sole travel agent, and you'd be contacting them to make arrangements for the family travel if you want to get all on the same reservation.
Right. TLC can put you on the same reservation. You're also welcome to, book through whatever third-party site. We've looked at things where you pull up Expedia on one tab and, Concur in another tab, and you can book the same flights. It just won't be all on the same reservation. We're putting together a business process document to kind of walk through all the options for that, for family traveling with family specifically, to make it a little easier on folks so they know. Are you asking Carrie to come test? If you are, let me know, shoot me an email, and we'll try to get you involved. So Jane, I believe that, and Susan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it does the calculation for reducing the commute mileage inside of the application. You don't have to do that manually, correct?
Correct. That you can identify if it is commute needs to be subtracted, on one way, maybe both ways. And, it's all like within the Google map, and you're making those selections.
Megan, yes, employee preferred airlines, you can select whichever one as long as your flights are within travel policy, state and USM and UMB travel policy.
There are UMB preferred airlines that are also tagged within the application and noted as a preferred airline. That's what I was kind of questioning. Is it something to enforce the use of? And, theoretically, we've got, whether it's discounts or some sort of preferential treatment with the certain airlines that travel leaders has coded.
The per diems are done by the same per diems are used by the federal government. Different departments can use different rates. So the way we've configured that is the rates, excuse me, it's all calculated based off of the same rate. And then there's a reduction that you can put in there. So if you aren't going to do something, or you're only going to pay for so much, the department, you can put that reduction in there to drop that in those per diems down if you need to. All right. So we are removing central office from some small dollar, low risk types of travel. If you're getting mileage reimbursed or whatever it is, I think it's less than $75 because that's the IRS level. We pulled central office approval off of it. No real need, so we can remove that from in the workflow. So every employee.
I'm sorry, you mentioned that an employee booking their travel can pay for it themselves, or they could just select a P card. If they don't have a P card.
Not a P card, a ghost card. So in Concur, in the application itself, we'll have I think it's a Diners Club card saved. And if you're booking a flight, you can select that card on your payment, and that will then allow you to pay for your airfare.
That's the same credit card that today, if you are booking through the travel agent, they charge that credit card. It's kind of behind the scenes, so it's the same thing.
Okay, that makes more sense. And can we use the travel agent for international flights? Because that gets a little confusing, and I know not everybody wants to book during international flights.
Yes, and specifically, the trip from the U.S. to the international site should be booked through Concur. There's not going to be, I'm never going to say never, but it's generally that's not the problem for international travel. When somebody's traveling between countries, and we typically would see somebody flying over to one of our African countries where we've got an MJIC, office, and then now they want to fly, let's say, between Kenya and Nigeria. Well, if there's a local regional airline between those two countries, that might not be in that global distribution system. That's what Concur uses. That's what Expedia. There's this, I'm not sure if it's US based, but it wouldn't necessarily have like a local African airline. In those cases, either using a travel agency, within Africa, or, using the Direct Airlines website to book your travel would be appropriate. So, but generally, what can happen is you can say, well, in the Concur, in global distribution, you can go from the US to Nigeria, and then to get from Nigeria to Kenya, you have to go to Switzerland and back, and that doesn't make sense. So to say it can't be used, but it might not be the most efficient, but that would be the time where to say Concur can't do it, do it on your own.
And do we need any kind of waiver or exception for doing it outside of Concur?
For that specific circumstance, no. Booking any other, if you were to book your flight to an international country, then that's going to require Dean or VP approval because that is going to be outside of policy.
When you select exception booking, it does add a step in the workflow process to send it up to the Dean or VP of that area to sign off
So it's
on
not
it.
an outside form, it's built into the process.
Built
Correct.
right into the process. That's correct.
So much better. Okay, thank you.
Yep. If a third party is paying for your flight and they are booking it, they don't have to use. You don't have to use Concur to do that. No, if they're doing everything themselves. So I think we are caught up on the questions. Is anybody else? I know we only have an hour, so, but I want to make sure we answer all the questions that are out there and hear everything out. All right. I'm going to step forward to the next slide, which is our workflow. So as you can see, it's the workflow is largely the same as the existing workflow. This is all inside of Concur. So, you put a request in and this workflow, it all happens inside the application. Any notes, any attachments that get saved are all in there. There's obviously that top one is a lot simpler if you're not taking an international flight and you're booking inside of Concur. It skips the international step and the Dean VP step. After you have your request fully approved, you click into your request and click go into booking, and it takes you right into the booking tool, defaulting all of that information from your request into the booking tool, which is nice. And then on the expense side, again, you have the same thing when you put your expense report in. It goes through this workflow. And I wanted to show this slide because the next slides are talking about delegates and delegation and how that works in Concur. So just please keep in mind the workflow process as we go through this. So for approvers, again, very, very similar to how we do this today. Cost center approvers, the way that it works for cost center approver is that every org will have a primary cost center approver. So if you have an org and you have 5 people right now that approve the costs for that org, you'll have to designate one, and then that person can delegate out to the other 4 to make sure that everyone can then review and approve. But we have to do one primary. We are working with Concur to change that requirement. We're going to put an enhancement request in. We'll see what kind of traction we get. But as of right now, we have to designate one cost center approver one primary cost center approver per org, and then that person has to delegate that authority out. We are going to ask that everyone submit a security request. So, you can tell us who your primary cost center approver is, and we can get that set up, and then that person can go in and delegate to the others. Those other folks will still need to also submit security requests, but they won't be primaries. They'll just be, they'll just have the role to do cost center approvers. Supervisors will be automatically granted access to the system, so there won't be a security request there. We're bringing them in via timesheet. So the timesheet supervisor will be the person that is put on the employee as their supervisor. The deans and VPs will also automatically be granted access to the system. I'm not going to ask deans and VPs to go fill out some security request forms, and I'm not asking anybody else to either. So we'll give them in. There's only a handful of them, and then obviously, hopefully, they're only approving a very limited number of requests or expense reports. Travel administrators are also at the employee level, so each employee will have a primary travel administrator. And when those folks will also have to submit a security request form, we're asking that those travel administrators set as a primary at the org level. So when you submit your security request form, you will say this travel administrator is the primary travel administrator for whatever org. And using the employee home org, we will get that person assigned to be the travel administrator for all those employees. They before travel administrators can be granted access, they do have to go through training, and I will go through the training slide. I think it's 3 slides away to walk through that. But I just wanted to, we will reach out to all of these folks. So expect an email from us if you are a cost center approver or a travel administrator. We'll be reaching out to ask that you submit your security reforms as soon as they are ready. We're hoping that they'll be ready later this month. And we'll start collecting that data, and then we'll be able to load that all into the system as we go live. Delegates. And I want to, this is a little change from how we work it now. I know I mentioned, primary cost center approver can then delegate their authority out. You can delegate your authority out to 99 different people, I think. So there's not really a limitation on, how many people you can delegate to. Same thing with supervisors, and same things with travel administrators. They can all delegate their authority. Delegates are self-assigned though, so we can't do that centrally. Users are going to have to do that themselves. So if you're a cost center approver and you're the primary cost center approver, once you get approved and once you submit your form and everything goes through, you'll have to go into Concur and then add the delegates that you want to also be there, or that you want to delegate that authority to. Delegation is all or nothing. So if someone is a primary cost center approver and a primary travel admin and a supervisor, and they delegate, the person they delegate to gets all of that approval authority. Now, you can't approve unless you have security. So if I delegate out to someone who doesn't have one of the securities, one of the accesses, right? If I'm a supervisor and a cost center approver, and I delegate to someone who is a supervisor but not a cost center approver, then they won't be able to approve the cost center side. But I think it does get a little tricky on some of the orgs in some of the departments where the same people do the same thing. So we just have to think it through. If you have questions, if you need help with this, feel free to reach out. We can walk you through it. That's not a problem. It will work. It's just, it can take a little finagling. And then of course, deans and VPs, we're asking that they don't delegate. We will know if they do because we can see it. But unless they're going on some kind of a leave, right? Unless they're going to be out of the office, we don't want to stop the approvals, but we want to make sure that the deans and VPs are looking at this. And then we will be able to see everyone who approves something and when they do it. So there's an audit trail on every request and every expense report that tags the exact person who approved and when they did it. So if you do delegate out and there is a bunch of different people with different accesses in your department, you can still go back and look to see, who approved what and when they did. I'm going to step through a quick example because I know this is kind of confusing. And then we're going to talk about training. So if I am a supervisor and a cost center approver, and Lakshmi is also a supervisor and a cost center approver, and if Lakshmi delegates her authority to me, say she wants me to be able to approve costs on her org, well, I get both, right? So this is what I was trying to say. I hope this makes it a little clearer. I can be a supervisor approver for both the people I supervise and for the people Lakshmi supervises because she delegated to me. And I'm going to be a cost center approver for both the cost centers that I'm the primary approver and delegate on, as well as anything that Lakshmi is the primary cost center approver on. I'm sure there's questions around this. Like I said, reach out, let us know what you're thinking, what your circumstances are, if you need help, and we can help you get it figured out. I'm going to pause here and take a drink of water, and then we're going to talk about training. So, as you can see, a lot of our training is self-study. The only people that are going to be required to go to instructor-led training are travel. We will be training the pilot group in early November. I think we've already reached out about some dates to those folks, and we'll be in touch with more as we get those solidified. The rest of the training will kick off in earnest in January as we train the rest of the campus. And our training team has put a ton of effort into getting these courses lined up, and then they'll be putting a ton of effort into holding live instructor-led training as we go through to train, to make sure that everyone who needs to be trained can be trained. Everybody else that's not a travel admin it's self-study training, which is the same way it works now. your travel training is all through UPK, and these will all be through UPK, or we're standing up a new training application called UPerform. So it'll, when you go through it, you'll probably be using UPerform. And you can see, depending on your traveler type, depending on your, what you're doing, you can see what we recommend. Unfortunately, travel admins, that's not a recommendation, that's a requirement, and you won't be able to get your access unless you go through that training. So else, these are recommendations. I would very much encourage you all to take training, step through it, make it, so you can answer any little questions that you have. But this is our training. We will be in touch. We will certainly have training dates, specific dates and times at the next town hall, so you can sign up for them. And then we'll be reaching out to folks who need to take this training. If you're in the pilot, we'll be in touch so you can get your security access and any training that needs to be done in. So look for emails from us. Shoot me an email if you think that you should. So will training to be available for travelers? Yes, you can step through all the self-study for travelers. We're not going to be holding live in-person sessions, instructor-led training for travelers. That'll be limited to travel admins, but you can step through the training yourself. We'll also have some recorded webinars that are out there, so you can watch it. You can watch those classes, yourself on your own time. And we'll have a bunch of user aids, a glossary, all these different things we'll be putting out there. Look for the updates on the website as we get closer to. And that's all I have. And now we get to the demo part of our day. Does anybody have questions before I jump in to the application? And let me make sure that it's all working properly before I share my screen to them. No? Crickets? Awesome. So I have to change what I'm sharing. Tell me, does everyone see Concur? Just nod your heads if you have your video on. All right, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. I can see you. I appreciate that. So this is what the application looks like, right? If you're a traveler and you log in, this is what you're going to see. At the top, you can see company notes. We've got a link to our travel policy, our international pages. Excuse me, any reminders that we want to put out there. There'll be a training link on here once we have training that's live. So if you step in and you're like, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing, you can just click the training link and it takes you to the UPK and you can step through and follow all the instructions. Down here, you see, excuse me, kind of what your tasks are, any open requests, any open expense reports, if you have available expenses that need to be added to expense reports. You can click into your dashboard for your requests, and we're doing request and booking today. We'll come back and do expense later. Like I said, I gotta keep y'all coming back. And you can kind of see all the requests that you have submitted. Now, I suspect most people won't have more than 2 or 3 at a time submitted. I don't know, but you will be able to see everything and what stage of the workflow process it's in. So you can kind of see, this one has been submitted. It's waiting with the department travel administrator. This one's been submitted. It's with the supervisor. You can see exactly what it is. This one has been fully approved and you're ready for online booking. You can click into it and then click booking. It takes you right into the booking tool. So you can see all that. If there's been one that's been returned, it shows up. It's bright red. You can see exactly why it was returned and what's going on with it. You can also look at, old requests. If you want to go to all your requests, anything that's closed or canceled. You can go in. If you go on the same trip every year, you can go in, you can pull up your request from last year, you can click copy and everything drops into it. So you don't have to go in and rekey all that stuff in. You can just carry the same thing forward and update some amounts and submit it. To create a new request, you can click here. You can also click on the front, makes it, pretty simple. And then this is our request, creating a new request. So you have to specify what kind it is, how you'll book your trip. Again, we talked about, agent assist is you put your request in, this sends it to the travel management company and they'll reach out, they can book it for you. Booking in Concur, books through, that same, like we talked about, it sends it to our travel management company for the booking. So they have everything, but there's no fee, there's no additional charge. It looks very similar to, Expedia or Kayak or whatever you normally use. Exception booking. This is the one that triggers that extra workflow step. And then no booking. So if you're not booking a flight, you don't need to book anything in Concur. You just select no booking if you're only taking a road trip somewhere. You put your request name in, so what the request is, and you select your trip dates. Let's see here. Let's say I'm traveling in June 13th to the 16th. These dates that you put in, these will, calculate your per diems. They default into a lot of all the different fields. So when you go in to add expenses, if you're adding a hotel, you're adding airfare, or whatever it is, these dates default in. You don't have to key them back in. You have to tell us why you're traveling. So I'm going to say I'm going to a conference. And then you have to select your trip type. So, in-state, out-of-state, international. I'm going to say out-of-state. And then what kind of traveler you are. So I'm staff. I'm doing this as myself. Obviously, we've got some other ones in here. And then you have to tell us where you're going. So if you go to a lot of the same places, you can just select your recently used. If not, you can, key it in. So let me see. I don't know. Maybe I want to go to Portland. And you can see, it comes up right here. So I'm going to go to Portland, Oregon. I don't know why. Maybe I like the rain. And then you have to describe the benefit to UMB. So I'm going to a conference. So I'll just put that it's a conference. You can fill this out. I think different departments are going to have different requirements on what they want to see. Does this trip include personal travel? So if it does, you say yes here, and then you include your personal travel dates. If it's, no personal travel, it's pretty simple. You just say no. And then, who's paying? So if UMB is paying, you select yes. And this includes any payments, that are going to be paid by grants that flow to UMB. Selecting no means it's being paid by a third party, the foundation, your conference host, if they're paying for everything. If you select no here, it skips the cost center workflow step. So since there's no cost to UMB, no one needs to approve that. I'm going to select yes. And then in case there's any questions here, as we go through, we did put this quick help in to kind of clarify exactly what that means. Because we have gotten that question several times. Oh, well, it's a grant paying for it. It's not UMB. Still flows through, so we still need to say yes. Down here is, how, what you're charging to pay your trip. So the first time you go through, we have a default SOAP-F set up for every traveler. We're calling it a travel clearing account. It'll default in here. The first time you travel, you'll have to update it. As you can see the most recently used. And you can just select one and it fills everything in. If you're selecting a new one, you either select a SOAP-F or a project. So if I'm selecting a project, if I want to go, you can see all the projects as they come up. You can put your project in, it'll charge that project. If I'm selecting a SOAP-F, it'll populate in. What's neat about this is if I'm selecting an org, when I go to the next step, it's only going to show me the activities that are associated with that org. So as you go through this list, the list gets narrower. So if CITS, if they're going to pay for me to go somewhere, I don't know, administrative computing, I'm only then going to see purposes that are associated with that org and that activity. And it becomes very quick to simply step down and select. You only have to do this once. If you use the same SOAP-F for the same project to take lots of different trips, when you go in, you simply select that, it all comes in. Any information, comments to approvers that you want to put in is right there. So then you hit create request. And this brings you into, where you're adding your expected expenses, right? Excuse me. My wife brought me down a pot of coffee while I was on this, so I'm taking advantage of that. So you add your expenses. So I know I'm going to buy this air ticket, right? So I'm going to put this in there. And as you can see, these dates, they flow in. I don't even remember. I think we're going to Portland. So we're flying from BWI, which, well, I have to select it because I just used it. But you can search for any, if you're flying out of Philadelphia or, Dulles, whatever, you can select your outbound flight. And then you search for where you're going. And this gives you the airport, so PDX, right? It's Portland. Your trip dates default in from your request. And then these depart at times. These are required fields here, but really they just allow you can put this information here, and then when you go into the booking tool, these dates come in, or these times come in, excuse me. Any comments that you need to make, and then what you're expecting to pay for this flight. And you hit save, and it adds it in. So the other thing, you can add all your expenses, and I'm not going to go through all of them. But I did want to show per diems. So you have per diems. All of this information is, it knows what city you're going to. It knows your dates. So you just hit save, and it calculates your per diems and puts them right on here. Right. That's calculated through. Oh, clicked into it. Sorry about that. It's calculated in. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do this calculation. It does it all inside of the system. You add anything else you would like to add. You add any attachments that you need to attach. You can print this if you need to, and then you hit submit. And yeah, you're saying that, yes, I'm submitting this. This is an accurate representation, and my travel will be, completed at the lowest possible cost and all that. And you can see, where it is. It's submitted, and you can see who it's sitting with on your workflow. So I'm going to pause here before we go into the booking tool. And I'm going to scroll back through those questions, which, Susan, you're doing an amazing job on. Good grief. This is a lot of questions. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for asking questions. Believe me, if you have it, there's somebody else with the same question.
So let me I'll answer the one that Maureen Hurd had just asked about. Sure. If the cost of the trip is being split between more than one SOAP-F. That on the header, you saw there's only room for one SOAP-F or one project, and that will default to all expenses. So if you only have the one and that works, that's great. If you have multiples, then on that expected expenses page, when you're putting in each expense type, you have the ability to say, hey, maybe, you've got an or a different funding source who's only going to pay for the airfare or only the hotel or at that level. And with that, once you put that in, you can allocate it up to, I'm not sure if there's, 99 or there's unlimited sources, but you can do to multiple funding sources as well. And you don't have to go in, if you end up having, 7 different expense types, you don't have to go into each one of them and allocate it out. You can select which of the ones that you want to go to this type of allocation. So it's very sophisticated, and really it should cut down on, your need to have to maybe charge something to, one account within, the travel system, and they do debit memos to move pieces of it, to the appropriate places. So that's a real good feature about this system. And it can be multiple projects, multiple SOAP-Fs. You can do it by dollar, exact dollar amount. You can do it by percent. Very flexible. I think it's the only one that I hadn't gotten to.
What if you do not want to allow a per diem for each meal? So the per diems are calculated automatically, and what you can do is you can add a per diem reduction on there. There's another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
Well, 2 places. Yeah, I mean, on the request, you have to do it differently than on the actual expense. Per diem reduction is used on the request. When you're doing the expense report, you're actually going in and choosing each meal and saying, was this provided, or and so in that case, if a meal was provided, it would be excluded. So they look a little bit different in the 2 forms, but you have the ability to do that.
Judith, yes, we recorded, and I apologize. We started a few minutes late. I was through the first few slides. If you would like for me to go over them with you, just let me know, reach out. We'll be posting the recording on the website, as well as I'll go ahead and post the full slide deck out there too, so everyone can view it. Because we did start, I think, on like the 4th slide or 3rd slide. That's my fault, and I do apologize.
And Julie Ash had asked about, do we list expenses paid with a P card, for example, paid with a hotel? That's a piece that we're working out and trying to figure out, how do we incorporate that to the extent that on the request, you'd want to have that included. And then when it gets into the expense report, that, what's on the request can be copied to the expense report. Of course, you want to exclude that. But that's where, you know, certainly we've got Jen Thompson from MAS is on our team here, and, you know, highly tuned into having duplicate expenses paid for. You know, if you have it on the request and it automatically copies over to the expense report, and there's nothing in our system to say, hey, it was paid by the P card, and especially like they get a receipt, you know, when they go to the hotel. And to that extent, we're trying to figure some of that out, some of these features that they might not be figured out when we go live. But we are working on that, because that does also affect, and I apologize because I've been reading and typing. So to the extent of talking about encumbrances, did that come up? Yeah. Or
we did discuss the encumbrances are a phase 2.
Okay.
A phase 2 piece. Yeah.
Because that would affect it as well, as you know,
Right.
that, you know, if you're encumbering and, you know, you've got it on the request, but it's not going to be paid and relieved by the expense report, then
Yes.
you charge it to the P card. Now you're double charged. So there are things like that we're going to fine tune after we go live.
Yes.
Phase 2
And
is loosened.
Julie, no, we don't have to. You don't have to reduce your per diems on the travel request. You know, that if that's how your department wants to look at it, just, you know, be aware that when that encumbrance does get created, it will create the encumbrance with, you know, everything that's on that request.
But you can, if
Right.
you want to. That's you
Right.
use that per diem reduction. That
Right. Yep. All right, so I'm going to jump into the booking tool, and this is the booking tool. I want to say that we have not connected our request to our booking because this is a live feed. These are real flights that you can buy and accidentally buy and then be stuck with. So we haven't connected it because we want to avoid as many mistakes. You know, as much as I would like to take some trips, I don't really want to pay for them. And, you know, obviously I know UMB is not going to pay to send me somewhere that is not business related. So I will step through this, but I will not be buying the trip, so to speak. So if we are, you just put in here, we're leaving from BWI or wherever, you just put your city in or your airport in, and we're flying to Portland. So you could put PDX or you could put Portland, it comes right up. These will default in based off of your trip request. We don't have that integration set up right now, like I just said, because we want to avoid accidentally buying tickets, especially non-refundable tickets. But this information will come in. You can select your time, and then this plus or minus 3 hours. So it leaves, you know, plus or minus 3 hours from 9 a.m. So from 6 a.m. to noon, and then the same thing coming back. And then you search, right? And this will pull up all of the existing flights as they come up. You can see all of it. I'll take a sip of coffee while we wait. So you can see up here, you know, what airlines it is, 1 stops, 2 stops, where your results are. You can search down here by schedule. If you want to look at, you know, timing, you can stop by fares if you're looking for the cheapest price, right? It's $793. So if you want to fly Delta, I'm just going to select this first one. And we're going to select this $793. You can see, so this is a good one, that you can see that if you are booking outside of some policy, or if it doesn't stop you, but it does warn you that there's a trigger for a travel rule. And then you just have to document why you're booking outside of it. So you can select why I needed to buy a refundable ticket, and this, you know, the cheapest ticket was a non-refundable ticket, you know, whatever it may be. You know, somebody else was traveling on the same flight and I was booking later, so my fare is more expensive than the cheapest fare. You know, whatever it is, it just has to be documented. You can do that right inside of the application. So here are my flights, you know, leaving Baltimore, returning from Portland to Baltimore. And log in as a user. This will be your information here. You can add your frequent flyer program. If you have a Delta program you want to add here, you can add it in. You select your seats, you look at your price, and then you select your method of payment. So here you can add your own credit card. You can also select, you know, the UMB card from here. These are obviously test cards. And then you hit reserve, and that's your flight's reserved. That's it. If you pay for the UMB card, the charges will process through and be posted I think once a month we get the credit card feed, and then those charges are posted in. If you're paying on your own credit card, you won't see it. It'll go into your expense report for reimbursement, and then it'll be reimbursed to you after your trip. Jill, as a rule, do we always have to book the cheapest? I'm going to let somebody who knows the travel policy with more depth than I do answer that question.
No, I mean, we do have an allowance, obviously, that there's, there's rules within the travel system that if you're going to book like a business class, you have to explain that. It's not that, we do have, for international, it's over a certain, number of hours, then, we allow for that, but you would have to explain that if there's a, some other, reason, then, it's basically, I believe there's like a tolerance level in there. It's going to be identifying, the lower ones, but if your trip is, much higher than the lowest available, it's just, you need to explain it. So. Generally, the feedback that we get is that people don't like using, the travel agencies because they say that they charge too much and, they don't provide the lowest level. But then, our experience is like, well, people seem to like to pick some of the higher, flights as well. So it kind of goes both ways there.
So can I
As you
just
can see, right, this is a pretty simple, oh, sorry, someone was.
Yeah, this is Jill. I just want to make sure I understand. So if we're booking for someone else, and I book them a $700 trip that has 4 stops, and they're like, I'm not taking 4 stops, I want a direct or something like that. We don't go with the cheapest, find the most reasonable.
Right. It's certainly we would take that into account. It's just if you had, it's like a no stop flight and, one was $700 and one was $300, like, well, you choose the $700 because that's where they've got their frequent flyer miles. But there's certainly no requirement that, we definitely want to factor in the time and
And all it is, it's a little drop down. You select, it pops up. It says, hey, this isn't the cheapest flight, or whatever it is, and you just select the reason, and then you put in your, there's a text field. You can explain, I didn't want to stop 4 times and sleep on the Chicago airport floor, and that goes into the approvers, and then it's all documented. So no, you don't have to. There's no hard stop, right? You can book whatever flight you would like. It just has to be documented. The reason. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, we have 6 minutes left, excuse me. And I'm through the demo. The booking demo went really quickly because it's really simple to use. Does anyone, do we have any other questions? Does anyone else come off mute? Do you want to come on and say, hey, we really like this, it's better than Expedia? Anybody? Can I get a taker on that one? Anybody that maybe is on the core team want to just say it just because? No? Okay.
I'll say
I love it.
I think it looks
great.
pretty good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Luke, great job. It looks great. Did a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Beth. Oh, I love it. I love it. I want to say we still have some questions coming in. We will have a recording of the chat. We can put some FAQs together, for the ones that pop up and incorporate that into our training. So thank you for asking questions. We do appreciate it. I want to say thank you to everyone for taking time out of your day and coming. We appreciate that as well. Julie, you can add attachments on the request itself. There's a little button. I showed it, but I was moving pretty quickly. But you can add attachments to the requests. You can also obviously add attachments to your expense reports. We will be sending out the next town hall times in December, I think is what we're targeting. And I'll show you expense reports at that one. So please come back. You have my email address, everyone on here. You can reach out to me. You have questions, concerns, comments. You just want to vent, that's fine. You know how to get a hold of me. I want to say again, thank you all for your time. And if we don't have any more questions, I will call this a meeting. Call this a town hall.
Can I stay on the line and ask you?
Yes, Judith. Yep, I'll hang out for you. Oh, we're dropping. Michelle, how many